Oh my. In this episode, proof that guns can't and should not be taught how to swim. Always by the book first. Dynamiting out screws. Boil, boil, bubble in trouble. Don't wire wheel off to read the name. Crossbolt, really bad. Scraping and removing distinguishedly screwed up finish. Remove, said Crossbolt. Another save. Sometimes I just feel like I'm beside myself. A K98 that has obviously been stored in some sort of wet location. This thing is so bad, the guy that gave it to me honestly thought I was going to cut it in half and just take it out of the gene pool. I don't know yet. I think we can take this apart, get a good look down its bore, and see whether or not when we're done we can get it back to looking something like this. This is what an old milsurp should look like. That's what this one looks like. So start pre-breathing your helium, folks, because we're going to be on a deep dive, and nitrogen is toxic at these depths. Down the rabbit hole, and it's flooded. So while we don't have a proper camera mount to do this, Bruno has given you a hand pan here of just how glocked up this thing is. We've got wood here that's damaged, rust growing out in blooms. We've got cracks. We've got impact damage. We're missing parts. But basically the whole thing is here. And what we're going to do this is in two steps here. We got to do the metal. And on this one, this is a gun we're going to do the wood on, because this wood, this is mold growing here. There's mold on this, and then there's actual oxide jacking where the rust is pushing the wood away. So I guess the first place we got to go here is taking the front end of this thing off. This nose metal, are we in frame here? This nose metal has been kind of shoved forward already so that someone could steal this forward locking band, and I think I've got another one of those around. And then all this wood is getting loose enough that this will come off. Okay. So, first place to be very, very careful on a Mauser is this bayonet lug is a piece of metal that is slipped up over the wood and held in with a cross pin. And guys will come in, and you'll see this, and they'll put this chisel down here, and they'll whack on the end of this stock so hard, like that they will actually blow this entire piece of wood off, and you wind up getting given this nose band attached to this piece with a bunch of wood sticking out of the front end of it. Not good. So while this isn't a laminated stock, this is with the nose cap, and it got hit and it got taffy pulled. This thing got blown right off the front end of a stock. And you can see here there was a little bit of oil soaking. This is where a cross pin went through. And it's a weak spot in the stock. So if you're just banging on that nose metal, there is a very distinct possibility that the whole front end of the freaking gun will just pop off. We want to push up here and up here, and we want to push gently from a long way away with a heavy hammer. You don't beat, you just tap on this. You don't have to beat on it. But what you're trying to not do is get up underneath into this piece of metal right here. You don't want to get up underneath into this right there. There's actually a piece of steel underneath that. This comes off separately after the stock is taken apart. So just remember that. And if you had to use some oil, this thing is so dry that I don't even want to put any oil on it. I want to convert it, and I think it'll turn back black again. So we take the front nose off, and then this should be a little bit tighter. If you have to, light taps with a heavy hammer is much better than heavy taps with a light hammer. You get a lot more control. All we're doing is just milking this off here. All right. And then we'll see whether or not we stand a snowball's chance here of getting this apart. Oh my. Holy ever loving. Look at that. Well, that's going to set the tone for the whole thing. So right at this point, everything we do is going to be driven towards looking inside the chamber and the bore, because if the inside of the bore looks like this, I am going to cut the barrel off it and start over again. Now let's get the light on that screw right there. That screw is pretty frogged up right there. I put the angel piss on these screws while we were dropping the chips from the opening here, so we could have a prayer possibly breaking them loose. One of the things I want to mention right off that I should have said earlier, this particular book right here, this Mauser 98 Actions by a gentleman by the name of Jerry Kuhnhausen, all of Mr. Kuhnhausen's books, and God, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, are top freaking shelf. This book is a gold mine. So like I said when I was talking about the Krag, get the book before you really get deep down inside something. If you're going to modify anything, get the book first. Awesome top shelf stuff, and this is in the shop for reference during this entire video here. Okay, so it was about 20 minutes ago. I put some rust on there. Put some I didn't put any rust. I put some oil on it. So we get a screwdriver that fits, and this screw does not have to be taken all the way out. It only has to be rotated about a quarter of a turn. We'll knock that down into the slot. And then pushing down on the screwdriver fairly hard here. We're losing the light. Pushing down on it. Okay, that cracked. We got lucky. Lots of force. Screwdriver tips that filled the slot. And all that mess is what you're hunting. Okay, we might, this one's actually going to come all the way out for us. All right. Okay, not bad. So I've said in the past that one of the places you get in trouble with these screws is right here on the side of the head gets glued into the mortise. The threads on this thing are actually pretty clean. I'll lay this out on a rag. We might get back and take a look at all of the screws as they came out of the gun later. The first thing I need to do with this action right now is get it out, see if we can get the bolt open, and I'm not even sure we can. We got to get this thing hanging in a conversion pot so we can see whether or not there's any bore. If the bore is all the way gone, none of this effort is going to be worth it. All right, we'll just extract this guy. Try to stay out of the light. All right, we're going to go for a larger screwdriver head. Okay, now I'm getting a screwdriver head here that's going to fit this slot tightly. And we'll go in here first. And the reason is that when we break the torque on this, I want the action to be hung from the wood in the middle. I don't want to break this out and have this whole thing try to cam down like this. And then we have to support it, and it's a real pain in the patootie here. Okay. You don't want that screwdriver too big. Yeah, we've got to get it lit right. You don't want it too big because you don't want to split the slot open and then wedge it down inside the screw hole. But it's got to fit, because if it doesn't fit, it's just going to make a mess. Holy crap! All right, hang on. We're going to go to plan B here. Plan B is an impact. Now, you don't want to... This thing is really non-judicious in its ability to destroy things. But we're just going to give this screw a gentle little rattle. Now I got some oil up underneath it on the bottom there, but we're just going to knock on this. Here we go. I don't know why I can't seem to keep the light shining on this the right way. Here we go. There we go. See, I'm not hitting it real hard. All right. I didn't hit it real hard, but you can see it's really rusted in the area right here on the head. This is where they get stuck. Not down here in the threads, but up top. That's why you put the oil on this side. Here we go. Let me get this out of here. Same deal on the other one. All right, I'm just going to knock this other stock screw out. And we'll see if we can do that without having to use something a little more violent. Let's see if this one will come out. Now, as we're breaking this tension here, This action's going to try to, there we go, this one came out, we got lucky. This action's going to want to fall out of the stock, so I'm hanging on to it. All right. Now, Bruno's going to do a camera move in the same take here, and he's going to track me down to the bench. And I've got my hand underneath it like this, and I'm just going to drop the stock on the table. And I'm going to let the weight of the action do the work. Okay. Yikes. Well, congrats. This is officially the worst one I've ever done. All right. More angel piss up inside here, the croil. And we've hit that and allowed that to soak, and we might get lucky. Oh yeah, we got lucky. Look at that. Okay, there's two reasons why we have to get the bolt open. One is maybe we're not going to get lucky and be able to get that into a disassembly position. But if we can get this out, this means that as the rust converts inside the barrel, yeah, buddy. Holy cow. All right, hang on here. Pop that up. Now we know we're not going to be able to look down this barrel and see through it. But what we're going to be able to do now is when we hang this thing back in the conversion pot and let it boil for about an hour, the first thing we'll do when we pull it out is we'll run a bore brush down this thing and see whether or not we can find the bottoms of the grooves. If we can find the bottoms of the grooves, it can be lapped, it can be brought back from the dead. Let's get back and get this thing hung in Thor here. Bubble, bubble, boil in trouble. Bruno, do me a favor and throw that far right-hand switch, please. Just drop it back down to 120. Thank you. Okay, so all we're going to do is let this convert in a pot of boiling water. Now, my pot is larger than yours is. Yours is a piece of gutter. It doesn't matter. We're just going to boil it in water, and we're going to see if we can get the bore back. All other labor, not related to getting the bore back, is just designed to make a nice, pretty wall hanger. If it's going to be a wall hanger, we'll do that, but it drops significantly down my shop's priority stack. All right, this is an hour after it's been in the tank, and we're just going to see. I know that this gun would have to be converted 2 or 3 times in order to get all this off, but we're just going to walk this off the bottom here and see just how bad this is. So there's still some original areas. Now, I said we were going to go into bore, and that's great, but I don't want to handle this. I don't want this thing all over my hands, so we're just going to knock the rust off it real quick. Yeah, it's got some pitting, but it didn't go very deep. It didn't go very deep. You can see there what the original part of the gun looked like right there. And that's unique. Part of the rear sight fell off. Ausgezeichnet. All right, let's go get this thing up on a vise and see if we can get a brush through it. I'm just going to finish wheeling it here. Hey, one of the things I wanted to make sure that I brought up right here was the fact that I call this a wire wheel every now and then. This is a carding wheel. The whiskers on this thing are only 2.5 thousandths of an inch thick. And this is essentially a rotary piece of steel wool. A true wire wheel will throw sparks, will rip the skin off your fingers. So when I'm talking about wheeling things, what I mean by don't wire wheel is don't get a regulation, go out in your garage wheel and take it after one of these guns. This is a carding wheel. I could rub it all day and it wouldn't take the bluing off. If you're taking off the bluing, your wheel's too coarse. All right, so let's see if we can even get a brush down this bore. Oh. Yay. Well, let's consider it a victory for right now that the rod's turning. And we could even get the brush down it in the first place. All right, well, there is a lot of gack in this thing. But the inside of the chamber is there. Bruno, do me a favor and shine that down the board this way. Holy crap. There's actually metal in there. Okay, give me a little off axis so it's not quite so bright. Yeah. Holy cow. All right, that brings me to a point right now, at the point in this process that I want to show you. And I want to show you what the collectors are screaming at me about and why I'm actually on their team and they don't know why. Wow, so we've just had this breakthrough in the bore. Believe it or not, the bore is silver. We'll try to figure out how to photograph that for you, but a lot of passes of the brush later, I now know that the bore is there. Therefore, the rest of this gack can be cleaned up. So we have the Waffenamps here. I haven't looked up what factory this is. I don't care. Here's what I want to show you. This is uniformly blue. We have taken the outer layer of oxide and converted it into a black oxide, and this is uniformly blue. This is because somebody did not go after this gun with a wire wheel, and this is what the collectors are trying to keep you from doing to a gun. They don't want you to do this to the whole thing. So let's take a look. Give me a focus here, bud. All right, so now we have a Martini Henry that's been converted over to 22, but you see that shiny spot right there? Somebody ground down to that so they could read the letters instead of putting on magnified optics. They ground down to this. So now when this gun gets converted, there's going to be a huge white spot right there. And I got to tell you what, it's going to look bad. And this is why they don't want you to take wire wheels to historic guns, because when you scrub off that original finish, the original finish is gone forever. And there are guys that will wire wheel this thing down to the white and then try to figure out how to get the finish back on it when they could have just left it alone in the first freaking place. So now that we know the bore's good, we're going to rehang the barrel, and I'm going to give you some befores on this bottom metal. And you can see this is what I call sugar rust. It just flakes off. And the one event where it got wet is the first time. This thing used to be in pristine condition. It got wet. It's got gack all over it, right? So that was kind of your before on the bottom metal. And we're not even going to attempt to disassemble it yet. We're just going to take these barrel bands, this bottom metal, we're going to take everything, take the bolt in one piece, and we're just going to throw it in here, and we're going to do about a 45-minute conversion on it, just to break the rust loose so that we're not breaking anything when we're trying to turn screws and stuff. The piece of the sight that fell out, this is the ballistics computer for, I'm assuming from the age of this gun, the SS Patronin, the heavy bullet, the 197 that was just screaming, heavy recoil load. You could change this out with a different curve for different kinds of ammo. I'm sure they had one of these for the 157. Bruno's over there shaking his head emphatically, yes. Okay, we'll put the big, actually we're gonna do the screws in a separate run just because I wanna show you guys the before and afters on all the screws. So this is gonna go in the pot and get boiled, and the action is going back and forth here for another pass just to get this deep-seated stuff off. There's not all of this is pitting. A lot of this is still laying on the surface. We converted down to it. Now we need to keep going. At this point, someone's going to say, how come you don't do electrolytic recombination on this? Why don't you cathodically run this back the other way? The problem is all of this rust would turn back into iron where it is, and I wouldn't get to see what's underneath it. I want to try to get down to smooth steel. Now, optimally, let's get the light shining on it. You see this right here? This is what the gun looked like before this event happened. So, yeah, it is what it is. And we're never going to be able to polish it back to this, and it's never going to look like this. So the trick is to just stop all of the rust on this thing. So now, I'd like to get this nose piece out and convert it. So what I want to do when I drive this pin, I want to support this in such a way that when I hit it, it's like this. So if we were to support this in the vise this way and drive down on it. We're relying on the friction of the vice jaws to hang on to it. But if we come sideways, and we come in right behind it, Bruno, swing around behind me and support the rear end of this thing, please. Thank you. Okay, so right now I got Bruno behind me, hanging on to the back end of it, and we're going to be able to just support it. So we're supporting the metal, and we're driving in the direction where we're hitting up against something. And that pin's going to show up here. Just see the pin coming out the other side, and then I'm just going to pop it out like that so that it hits the bench. We pull this off, and then we should be able to gingerly extract this wood out from underneath it. And note that it's undamaged, but you can see there's red rust all over it. Sooner or later, this wood would get infected with mold, and then it would dry rot and we would be done. But the important thing is that it gives us back this piece right there so we can get it in the pot. All right, now we're on the wood part of this. Everything's cooking in the pots. It's going to take me 2 or 3 passes through. But we got something we got to deal with if this gun is going to be shot at all. And it's that crack right there and that crack right up there. Let me see if I can get that lit better. Yeah, wait a minute. I'm going to start it over again. Don't worry about it. Okay, we've got all the other metal parts. Are probably going to go 2, maybe 3 passes on this thing in order to get all the way down to the bottom of the metal and get all the rust off this gun. We've got another metal part in here that we're going to have to fight, and this isn't one of those times when it's going to be optional to leave the crossbolt in the gun. The crossbolt is actively rusting, and there's active rust sweating out of here, but more importantly, that crack right there and that crack right there means that this bedding has failed. Now, would it still hold recoil? Probably, because the recoil is going back to your shoulder through the walls of the magazine well. But that's something we're going to have to deal with, and that's a glue failure because, as you can see, this stock is laminated. This is basically a huge chunk of plywood. So that's going to have to get dealt with. It's going to have to come out. And I would tell you to not take that out unless you really have to. So here's what we're going to confront. This nut right here, we're going to have to make a spanner for it and put a little bit of the penetrating oil on this and just accept the fact that the penetrating oil is going to get on the stock. It just is. There's not much we can do about that, but we're going to have to deal with it. So I'm going to put a little bit of penetrating oil on that. And we're going to let that sit and go off and talk about other things that are right near it. We're going to talk about the condition of the wood here. We're looking at what's left of the varnish, which isn't much. It's not even varnish. It's a single pass of linseed oil. We're going to talk about all this because usually when I talk about these conservations, I don't talk about the wood because 99 out of 100 times the wood doesn't need to be messed with. In this particular gun, we're going to need to mess with the wood. So let's get on with that. We're doing an inspection now on the inside of the stock, and we're looking for spots in here where the mold is actually actively growing. Right there, that's actively growing mold. There's another spot I saw it, and I can't even tell you whether or not this spot is mold or a spider web. I can't tell you what that is, but that looks like mold to me. So don't breathe any of this stuff. You can see we have glue failures that are non-critical, but what'll happen, especially on like a 1903, is when the bedding fails up here, this rear stock bolt starts acting like a splitting maul, and it'll start beating the stock to pieces. And you can see here, that glue joint failed, that glue joint failed. And if there are any cracks that go further down in, no. So the beginnings of the destruction of this thing had already begun before the corrosion event happened. Let's get up into some other places here. Okay. Let's go right here. Now, you can't take these out. They're swaged in. Yeah, it's technically possible to take this out, but it's not possible. So you're stuck with what you got here. So I've got a moto tool, and this thing sounds terrible because the front bearings are gone on it, but I've got a moto tool with a brush mounted in it. And if you're really, really careful, you can come in and brush this off lightly. You can't convert it, and don't go rubbing up against the wood too hard. And this is going to be the one spot on this entire gun where you're going to use a little bit of cold blue. We'll get that at the end when we trim out. You don't have a choice here. You've got to wheel through this. This is all inactive oxide right here. This is all active, and if you don't get this off, see how it's bright orange underneath? If you don't take this stuff off, it's just going to keep right on going, and it's going to keep right on doing it. I guess we could just oil it and call it patina. We see some dents. We can definitely see that this is a laminated stock. This is made out of sheets of wood all glued together. It's a piece of plywood, except in this particular case, I'm not entirely positive that the grain alternates directions like in true plywood. The grain appears to all be running the same way. And there's a gouge here. And steaming can remove dents, but it doesn't do a particularly good job of removing gouges. We're going to try to steam this up. We're going to try to steam a couple of other things up here. But in this particular case, the surface finish on this is so far gone, we're going to have to rub down through it. This is a piece of steel. It's a piece of spring steel. There's nothing fancy to it. You can use just about anything. But all we're doing is combing off and getting smooth. You could even draw file it like that. The trick is to get this all squared up. Now, this is a burnishing tool. It's hard as a rock. And we're going to take this edge and just roll it down like this. And what this is going to do is put a slight Gumby head on this thing. And it allows you to do this. Okay, there's a very, very slight edge there. And it allows you to do this. So there's usually a reason for everything I do. And the reason why I showed you this scraper a little while ago was to tell you that this is going to be the spot where we're actually going to come in and gently remove the surface from this. We don't have a choice. This gun has gone so far now that there's no way to even call what's on it savable. But you'll see here, I'm just lightly removing the surface of this. I'm not even taking off any wood. I'm basically getting a layer of really dirty, really nasty, heavily oxidized surface gack off of this. You see that there? No sandpaper. We haven't removed any markings. We'll come over the top of a marking and I'll show you. There's nothing that we're damaging here. We're not removing a whole lot of wood. This is just basically ground up whatever was on the surface, and it's here, and all the imperfections are here, but we've cut it off with an edged scraper. So one of the deals about those laminated stocks on those 98s is it made them tough. You could abrade them. They're tough to dent. So I've got a chunk of walnut off an old 4570 trapdoor here that has had the ever-loving Terwillikers pounded out of it, and I want to show you some things steaming will and won't do. So up here on the periphery, we have a dent, and I've got it mounted up here so that you can see the fact that it's an actual impact bruise on the wood. These are all impact bruises up here, whereas this is an actual chip of missing wood. You can't fix this, so what steaming will do is allow you to lift wood fibers that have been impacted but not torn. So this towel, this is an old monocoat iron that I'm using here. You guys have seen me do this before. Now know that if you commit to this, like I said on the Krag, if you commit to steaming up dents, you are committing to messing up the finish, and you're going to have to redo it. But if you see here, all of those dents are pretty much gone. It just, the steam gets down in the wood fibers and reinflates them and pops them back up again. We might even be able to go after, let's say, hang on. There we go. Okay. So some of this stuff, if we cross light it, there we go. See how that's a dead dent is right there? So maybe we will be able to go like this. That's a little bit better. That's popping it up. You got to do it more than once. And I'm using the edge of this because this is really, really wet on the edge of this towel. So we'll do the same thing on that K98. It just doesn't have a lot of areas that needed to be steamed. But you can see here, that particular dent almost went away. Notice we've used no sandpaper yet. We're still in the whole scraping format here. And again, I know I'm not on that K98 stock, but a little bit of scraping goes a long way. All right, this crossbolt has been soaking in the oil in this shop now for about 2 hours. We've let it soak. And what I'm going to show you, I'm going to get yelled at for showing you, but very few people are going to be able to make the tool necessary to take this out. Now, a lot of guys will just try to take a regular pair of pliers and stuff it in here. This is not a regular pair of pliers. This particular pair of pliers has had their points sharpened down. But if you try to torque this bolt, this pair of pliers will twist. See how they're twisting? They're going to snap off. This is going to pop out. It's going to destroy something up here on the stock. That's where this wrench comes in. Because all a spanner is 2 pieces of metal that are sticking down. Hang on a minute, I gotta get my hands out of the way here. Or 2 pieces of metal that are sticking down and they're supported right at the bottom. So what this looks like when you're looking out from underneath the bottom of it, it looks like that. It looks like a regular spanner wrench. You plug this in and you push down on it. You're pushing down on it the whole time. You get this close and then you just bump it. You keep bumping it. You're trying to load it, and eventually this will break loose. But you must push down. If you allow this to cam out of this hole, it will do very ugly, very nasty things. And as we can see here, that is definitely turned. We can keep getting this out of the way. The problem is I'm in very bad body position. I want to be up over the top of this pair of pliers like this, and I want to be right where the camera is. I want to have my arm here and be up over the top. Resist the temptation to let this pair of pliers get too far away. So let me readjust the light here because even the light's in the way. There we go. Even the light's in the way. All right, and just rotate it. Now, bear in mind, if you take this stock bolt out, it's pretty serious. All right, ordinarily I wouldn't take it out, but this thing is dying underneath that line. And I would tell you this, on a gun that has not been through this moisture loading, on a gun that has not been this screwed up, you will not have to take this out, and therefore you will not be imperiling a gun that has decent finish on it. Okay. Now, while you're watching this, open a new window up and look up Cunningham's Law. Just saying. Okay, we managed to get this out, and you can see how rusted it's underneath. Now, we're going to put it back on for a minute. What? We just got it off. Why are you putting it back on? Because what we don't want to do is mushroom the threads. We don't want to mushroom these threads when we do the next step. And the next step is this. Track me, brother. I need to be over here. If we drive this fastener out, we drive this crossbolt out this way, we're going to blow the end grain off the end of the stock. It's just going to blow. It's going to crack this way. So I'm going to put my thumb over it, and then I'm going to tap on that screw to get this moving. And the reason why I'm putting my thumb over it is I'm supporting the end grain with my thumb, and it is moving. Here, hang on a minute. Let me do this. Let me turn this way so you guys can watch this crossbolt move while I've got my finger on it. Okay. Now we can back this thread off a little bit. Right there. Sorry, I'm reaching in front. Something's just got to happen. Okay. Now that that's been backed off, and you can see here we've already broken this line down here. This is already cracked and started to move, so the imperilment of blowing this up is now gone. We can take a brass punch and just very lightly massage this out of the way. And then once we're sure it's moving and we're not going to screw up the threads, we can back this out. But I mean, look at how yacked up that is. Okay. Okay. That is why we had to take that crossbolt out, because that's sitting to continue there and continuing to sit underneath the stock line and just rot and dissolve. It also gives us access to this wood here and this failed glue joint. And it didn't fail that bad, so I might have been seeing things. That's still strong, so we're not going to worry about it. But you do have this mold. There's mold growing up underneath this line. There's mold growing here. There's mold growing. All this has got to get neutralized, and I'm telling you, alcohol is a pretty good way to do it. Since we've already made the decision that the finish is coming off this thing, because let's face it, there was nothing here. The decision to screw this gun up was made by somebody other than us. The edges of these scrapers can dig into the wood, so you need to be careful you don't pivot this down. We've now removed most of the outer layer of the damaged spots. We've taken all that fungus with it. And to be really honest, I'm not even going to sand this. We'll keep going down this entire stock. And my preferred method of finishing this off is a Danish oil. Danish oil is kind of like boiled linseed, but it sets up sometime this month. Linseed oil just takes forever, and I never really have never shook hands with it. So I use a Danish oil, and I know I'm out of sequence here. I'm just going to show you something. Just a little bit of it, and it'll bring the natural luster of this back in a way that's not entirely incorrect. Now, I'm not going to do the whole thing because I'm just here. You put this on, let it sit for about 20 minutes, and then buff it off. And it's going to actually make that stock look pretty damn good again. So we'll do the whole gun like this. I'm not going to sit here and bore you and make you watch me sand out an entire stock. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. There's one other thing that I wanted to show you, and it involves a greenie. A regulation Scotch-Brite pad, and I like the purple ones, does a lot of what, say, steel wool would do, but not quite as aggressive as steel wool. And then you can take, so let's say you had a gun that had the finish was not nearly as screwed up as this one is. You could come in here and just buff off this finish, and it makes it very, very smooth. Now again, other areas of this stock have made me take the finish off, but a little bit of just regulation alcohol, just almost as a wetting agent. And you can sit here and rub. With this, you can do it with steel wool, but I'm finding that these Scotch-Brites are the way to go. See all that gack we just took off the surface? Here you go. Now, this surface of this particular rifle was the least screwed up of the whole thing, but there are other areas, like I said, where we have molds and mildews, and all that's got to get dealt with. The thing's got to come down to the bare, or in 20 years, this thing will have the consistency of a flipping mushroom. So speaking of mushrooms, wow, this forend, this handguard, I'm sorry, is hurting. And as we can see, there is a really, really big bow in this. Here, you can see it even better from the bottom. There's a big old bow in this side right there. I don't even need this ruler to show it to you guys. It's just huge, as opposed to this side, which is straight. All right, can we do anything about that? I don't know. This is a pretty thin piece of wood. Let's face it. So, yeah. We got it off the gun. It was split all the way down. The split was opened up here. And I've recently had a gunsmith that is a lot more senior to me than you might imagine. This guy's in his 80s. Said, well, have you tried that newfangled Gorilla Glue yet? Okay, because newfangled to him means sometime in the last like 2 decades. So I said, you know what? This is the piece of wood I'm going to experiment on. And what I wanted to make sure was that Gorilla Glue would actually take stain, and I didn't know if it would. The aliphatic resins, the tight bonds, don't take stain, like say Acroglass would. So I used the Gorilla Glue here, put it on, and then I had a bar in here and a rubber band around it like this, right there, so it wouldn't squish out. And it did a pretty good job of coming back here. And maybe we can go ahead and get this foam cut off. So from what I understand, this stuff is a polyurethane, and it activates, and I wouldn't say it dries, I would say it cures. Let's see here. Yeah, so that can all get sanded out. And then the top surface of this, we can come back in, and we're going to look at all the things we were talking about. So what do we do about this big gash? Honestly, not much. Not much. It's gone. There's not enough wood there. But what we've done in the past, here, let's see if we can do it here. We'll go ahead and we'll rub this out with this Scotch-Brite pad, and we'll see if we can even out. We can even out some of this tone. See how that's evening out? Now, I don't have it clamped in a vise, because you know what's going to happen if I squeeze this like this? It's just going to explode. I might be able to just bring it up to one side like that. Yeah. Okay, so we use the greenie. You can also use the steel wool here. Let's pop in here like this and see if we can't get that to come off. And it leaves this all smooth. There's also the scraper that we were using before. And of course, we were scraping and that's just removing all that mung from the surface. As far as, oh man, that's nasty. Try to avoid rasps, but in this particular case, you might be able to just kind of take that dipsy doodle out of it. Problem is that while I'm using this rasp, I'm putting scratches down the long axis of this. Are you gonna get this whole problem out of here? No, but you can make it look significantly less heinous. Anyway, when you get all done with this, let me get a completed section of this here because I want to show you something. So now that we've got this, we'll say that we have this relatively flat here. And it's smooth. There we go, right there. There is something else then. We can either stain the bad parts. So we'll pop a little stain out here. And we'll just run some stain in this. Now, what color are you using? I don't know. Whatever the hell's on my fingertip. You can come, you can go, you can knock this bad stuff back. And then you can come at it with some Danish oil. You guys that are into Linspeed, that's great. I've never actually shook hands with Linspeed, and I just can't get that stuff to do what I want it to do. So we're back with the Danish oil again. And we'll just run some Danish oil on this. And that's all we're doing. Just putting a little bit of Danish oil on it and getting that sheen back. Now, Danish oil, you're not coating this thing. This is not a coat. It's an application. Danish oil has to be allowed to soak down into the wood and do its thing, and it'll build up. So while we were away, that nasty oil-soaked piece of garbage came out looking like this. With all that, it used to have all that mildew on the inside. All the mildew was gone, and what this was a toothbrush, alcohol. We scraped off the big stuff, buffed down the stuff that wasn't, and then hit it with one coat of Danish oil, let it soak in, and one more, and then rub it in. You'll note that at no time during this entire discussion have I mentioned the word sandpaper. So the screw's cleaned up, and you can see in here that there's a little bit of active oxide. So let me get rid of this and show you guys that I didn't quite get down to the bottom of this yet. And if you look in here, you can see that when I scrub this, it's going to get bright. See how it's getting bright? So there's still active oxide going on in here. This needs to be boiled again, but I've got a little trick I want to show you guys. And here's what it is. If you take that active oxide and you rub a bunch of oil on it and you polish it, you have patina. It's magic. This is significantly sexier, isn't it? It depends upon your definition of sex, I guess. It does kind of look pretty good. A good point. That 03A4 is still kind of screwed up, but yeah, that 03A4 is jacked. We'll get there. At the end of the day, I told you this was going to be a deep dive. And it sounds funny when you're breathing helium. Your voice sounds funny now? Sometimes I'm just beside myself trying to figure out what this guy's doing.